exertion of their power and control over behavior, there's always this undercurrent that they want to instill dependency.
Oh, yes. Well,
Yeah.
they have to create dependency
They have to create dependency
for you to, I think, stay.
to stay in.
Right.
And so today we're talking about Steve Hassan's BITE model, which is a form of control, and the B stands for behavior, I stands for information, T is for thought, and E is for emotion. And today we're going to focus on the B, which is behavioral control. And we're going to give some examples with Brandy. She's going to tell us about some behavioral control that she experienced herself. But before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about behavioral control broadly, some examples before we get into her story. So behavioral control might come across as lots of rules and regulations. It might come across as behavioral modification through rewards and punishments. Kind of like training a dog. If you have a behavior you want them to do, then you're going to reward that. And if there's a behavior you don't want them to do, you're going to punish that and use negative reinforcement. So that's what behavior modification is. And then in terms of specific control, that's more broad. And then specifically, the behavior control might come across as controlling who you hang out with, what you wear, how you have sex, what you do with your leisure time. Then there's other ones that might include encouragement of indoctrination, whether you're in a group or by yourself. There's also requiring to ask permission to do certain things is another form of control. You might be required to report thoughts and confessing. And then you may also be discouraged to critically think. And again, that's by controlling what you are exposed to. And that gets more into the information. That's just some general examples, and now we're going to get into Brandy's story of exactly how she experienced behavioral control in the Jehovah's Witness organization. And I believe Brandy's going to start with her own example first.
Well, no, I mean, as you were kind of going through the different things that it could incorporate or include in the behavioral control, I was thinking of different things that I have experienced. Definitely asking permission, definite with clothing. I remember a time when my family and I went to Bethel and in New York, and there was two instances. One when I was about 12 or so years old, and I remember since Steve was not part of the governing body at the time, but we were representing him, and so we had to kind of have his approval in what we were wearing prior to being in public with him. So I mean, at 12, I remember being scared to death, thinking, am I wearing the right clothes? Am I wearing the right shoes? They had to be approved. The whole thing had to be approved.
Right.
And before we could go travel and visit Bethel. And then there was another time where my husband and I went to Bethel for the Gilead graduation. And I remember we were all staying in their apartment together. And there was only one bathroom, but there was like a shared bathroom, not really shared bathroom, but an individual bathroom down the hall. And it was early in the morning because we had to get there. And so we were going to use that bathroom down the hall to get ready. But I had to even ask permission to, if I could go in my full length robe that was extraordinarily modest.
Yeah.
Walk down the hall just to go into the bathroom, then to get ready for the day. And
so you felt you had to ask permission.
Oh, that was just kind of an understood thing that this is fine because we're here with, my aunt and uncle, Sue and Steve, and, we need to make sure we're representing, he wants us to make sure we're representing his image.
Right.
What he makes sure that he,
Yeah.
what he wants everyone to look like. So.
And the term control, like looking back at that, do you relate to that term? Like, did you feel controlled by that?
I don't think I realized that I don't know if I felt controlled. I know I did from the standpoint of like, I felt the need to have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is completely,
Right.
I mean, yes, you always are thinking about where you're going and how is appropriate for the event or the evening or the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you do coordinate all that, but this was very different. There was no jeans ever walking around. You could never wear jeans.
Yeah.
And Bethel with Sue and Steve.
Mm-hmm.
But it really played a part. And I remember having an elder in my congregation counsel me on my dress when I was a teenager.
Okay.
And I was wearing dresses down to my knees and below. I wasn't wearing.
You were still being counseled.
But yet I was still being counseled. It was something that was constantly in front of me. And so now I kind of have, Aaron, my husband, has made me aware kind of that, have I decided to wear this because I feel like this is what I should wear because this is modest and this is, appropriate. And it's when he reinforces back to me and makes sure that I'm wearing or doing things because this is what I feel, rather than feeling like this is something from something I was taught or told to be a certain way, or dress a certain way.
What you're talking about is that behavior modification piece. So as a teenager, your behavior was modified over time.
Yes.
And now you're deconstructing that modification.
Yes.
You're using behavior modification now for your own freedom.
Yes.
So it can be used both ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, decide for myself now, because I do kind of have a complex sometimes that I think I should have super modest dress, that I get very uncomfortable sometimes in certain things, and my husband can see that, and so he just wants to make sure I'm okay.
Yeah.
Good guy. Yes.
What are you enjoying about being able to choose what you wear, or like not ask for permission, or like what's that like now? Because you dress very cute.
Oh,
So.
thank you. I think it's just, my style really hasn't changed a whole lot.
Yeah.
I think it's just not being, how it affects me more emotionally, and having more confidence in myself.
Yeah.
And not being so overly concerned that I am being modest or appropriate. Not that I'm being immodest.
Right.
Like
you're not going from one extreme to the other.
No, that's not how I mean that. I'm saying I'm not like, okay, my shirt is up here, my dress is to my knees
here.
or below my knees, which is really preferable because above your knees is just, that was pushing it.
Yeah. The kneecaps.
Yes. Get them every time. So, I think it's learning just to have confidence in myself, and that if this is what I want to wear and this is how I want to portray myself, then I'm okay with that. That I need to be confident.
Yeah.
I think it's confidence.
More confidence.
Yes.
Right. And security.
Yes, and that's something I've definitely had to work on.
Yeah. Secure in your choices.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
What you wear and how you present, and because what they had instilled was insecurity. Am I wearing the right thing? Am I not? Is this appropriate? Is this too sexual? Is this,
whatever.
To fill in the blank.
Yeah. And now it's just being secure with myself. And confident, and that's being a woman. That's always a thing that I think we all struggle with, and
culturally.
Yeah. So I think that's been the thing I've had to learn and create and be like, yes, this is what I want to wear. This is, I really like it.
Yeah.
There's no reason why I can't.
Right.
So other things that I can kind of remember is, you know, as kids and a lot of witness families, I'm sure would understand or relate to this, of definitely being controlled by who we could associate with.
Okay.
From child to adult. And this goes so far now into the shunning, obviously, the being disfellowshipped if you've disassociated yourself.
Right.
Then you have your family and your friends are then required to now shun you or completely have no contact.
Yeah.
So that is behavior control from my standpoint of when I was in, and I chose to do those things because I thought that's what I should be doing.
Right. You should, and you, so what you're talking about is the fact that at times when you were in the organization, you did shun people who left.
Who had left, yes, because they were bad association.
Right.
They, we weren't supposed to talk to them. We weren't supposed to, you know, have anything to do with them, even if it was our family.
Yeah.
I know my mother was disfellowshipped for a period of time, and I wasn't supposed to talk to her. My brother was disfellowshipped as I went over, and you know, for a period of time, I didn't talk to him. And I think that is controlling our behavior when it's a natural inclination to want to talk and be around the people that you care about.
Right. Right.
I think that's a behavior control.
Absolutely. And how was that for you emotionally? Like, maybe let's take the example of shunning someone who wasn't your family. Did you ever have to do that?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
There were different ones, and it's funny because I think a lot of witnesses apply that to the shunning more to people, just the random people in the congregation or their surrounding congregation that they may know, they may not see regularly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easier to apply that rule or policy. But then when it comes to your family, you can see a lot of witnesses, it's a gray line. They find loopholes, or they try to find loopholes.
Okay.
They're like, so because I'm needing to speak to you about business matters, then I can speak to you.
Okay. Right.
So that is
the rationalization
yes.
within the expectation of shunning.
Yes. So a lot of witnesses will find those loopholes.
Yeah.
And like, I need to speak to you because of XYZ business related things.
Right.
And it's really just more so they can find a way to talk to you.
Right.
And I was explaining to my mom about why I felt so strongly about this. I'm like, because it's wrong, and as it is an innate feeling inside when you know you shouldn't be completely disregarding or pretending these people don't exist. Your family.
Right.
I'm like,
Just
it feels right.
Cold shoulder to them.
It's you don't exist anymore.
Just like that.
Right. And so, you know, that has definitely, that was, while I was still a witness, while I was still showing my brother, I was like, this still doesn't feel right. And so I finally listened to that feeling, to that, I don't know, call it intuition, call it just knowing, there's something innately wrong with that.
Right. Like you're thinking to yourself, like you're shunning your brother, your own family that you loved.
Right.
You had a good relationship with him.
Yes.
And so you had this expectation, and then you're thinking, you just knew in your gut, like, there's something wrong with this picture. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And also telling us that we can't, or highly, highly discouraging going to college.
Right.
And that's a super hot button issue within the Jehovah's Witness organization.
Yeah.
I did not go. My husband did go, but that was a big ordeal for him.
Right.
I know different ones that have gone, and it creates a big issue within the congregation.
Right.
It's to the point now where the last update I had heard back when I was still in was that if you have a child that's going to college, then as a parent, your qualifications within the your at your own Kingdom Hall, and if you're an elder or a pioneer, your qualifications to have those privileges are going to be called into question.
Oh, if you allow your child to go to college.
If you allow your child to go to college.
And this is interesting because, and bringing it back to the bite model, that's a behavioral control you would instill in your child or on the adult of the child that also touches on information control and thought control as well.
Right, because I had always tried to understand what was the college hot button, like what is it about college that they are so very much against.
Right. And were you, as a teenager, were you like thinking like, can I go to college? Or
it wasn't even brought up in my family as an option.
Not even an option.
It wasn't even an option. It was never like, it would have been, I would have been looked so negatively upon if I would have pursued any type of, especially 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And so it didn't even come up in conversation. It wasn't even part of my childhood planning to adulthood. There was none of that for me.
Right.
So I think that I always wondered, I couldn't understand what was so difficult, because people, as you're leaving high school and go to college, they would say, bad association, it's life after, being greedy. And I was like, but they're going to go to work and have bad association. And still making money, so people can still have greed without going to college. So those answers just never.
You were sifting through.
Didn't make sense.
Right, what they were presenting and the expectation, and kind of you're getting at this like the black and white presentation of these rules. Yes. And so and contradictions.
Because
themselves.
It just never made sense to me, because I'm like, you're still getting this bad association. You can still be greedy. Like those reasons for me were never, like they never made sense. They just never were good enough. Right. Because it wasn't a Bible-based principle. Other than bad association, that was always something that's reiterated from, like, that's usually one of the very first scriptures that a young person will have memorized, is have bad association spoils useful habits. So that's drilled into you from the very beginning. That is reinforced continuously. You go to school and know you cannot hang out with anyone at school.
This circle.
You have this circle of people in your Kingdom Hall or surrounding that I hope you find someone that you can relate to, or there's other kids your age, or and if sometimes there's not kids your age, or there are, and you get along with none of them.
So can you remember what, let's just say, maybe back up and say like what that was like being, 7, 8, 9 years old and not being able to engage with, do you have memories like that?
Yeah, I remember it was really hard because I enjoyed being social. And I would make friends. I don't have a lot of friends. I never have had a whole lot of friends. I keep my friend group fairly small. But, and I didn't have really any friends in the congregation that I was in when I was a kid. Even though there were kids my age, I just didn't really, our personalities just didn't really, jive or, click or... And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But I couldn't find friends anywhere else. And so that's very, I felt very controlling. As I can look back on it now, at the time you were like, this is just what it is.
It's just what you accept and what you're told. And
Right, especially being born and raised in it.
Yeah, and you develop this sense that is bad, this is good.
Right.
I reject everything else.
Yes.
I reject people, I reject ideas, I reject just a rejection of anything on the outside.
And this is going to kind of go into, I think, thought control but
Right.
from the standpoint of we're told they're bad association.
Yeah.
They don't love Jehovah.
Yeah.
So you should not be associating with them.
Right.
And so that creates a perspective of the world and of people that you're around, that they're all bad.
Right.
That this world is all bad. There's nothing good in this world.
Yeah.
So, and another thing that I remember that I wanted to mention is that another thing that they would say is that you can never leave, because if you leave,
right,
then your world, once you leave, you're going to be in a ditch with a needle in your arm. It's going to be a horrible life. It's all of these things are going to be bad.
Right. So with all of this, the exertion of their power and control over behavior, there's always this undercurrent that they want to instill dependency.
Oh, yes. Well, they have to create dependency.
They have to create dependency.
For you to, I think, stay.
To stay in.
Right.
And by you not having external resources or an external community.
Right.
That's all reinforced.
Right. And so it's the same, you're around the same like-minded people. You're thinking all the same way.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to, this goes into the information control, but you're not allowed to go access any other information outside of the witness literature.
Yeah.
So it creates, you hear these things, this is what the Watchtower is telling you, that this is how you're to behave.
Right.
This is how you're to make decisions. You're supposed to ask permission.
Right.
For to me, the silliest of things.
What about the idea, because this is common in a lot of religions, but the idea of confessing, and we're talking about behavior, so the act of, I did something wrong or questionable and I am expected to tell an elder or tell somebody about my wrongdoing.
Right.
Did you have that?
Yes. So that is very much, you are trained if you have done something questionable, if you've done something wrong, like broken a rule. And it doesn't have to be salacious and sexual in nature all the time. It can just be anywhere from just going somewhere and that's inappropriate, or having bad association, constantly hanging out with worldly people.
Right.
That is something that they will counsel you on. I experienced that myself. I was in a judicial meeting to where I had the fate of my future was in the three brothers, that I had done something that I felt was maybe crossed a line from the witness organizations.
Do you want to share this, or
I don't know.
No? Okay.
Well, it's nothing that salacious.
Okay.
It was just, and I didn't get disfellowshipped.
Right.
But it's that need to have to tell on yourself. And if you see anyone else doing it, then you have to tell on them.
Right, which is part of, it's kind of like an honor system.
Right.
But it's just high control.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Day in and day out.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was a teenager. And teenagers, I have one myself. They're good, and you give them these little boundaries to bounce between, but they're gonna mess up and make mistakes, and they're learning about themselves. And
right.
To have the weight, if you do anything at all outside of that straight line, that now you have to go tell these older men.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is kind of salacious in
Yeah.
nature, I mean, then you're now explaining.
Yeah. And that's part of that control. I think what you're talking about is controlling your sex life or how you have sex.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And as a teenager, as a young person, as a young adult, I mean, I knew people that, were 30 or so when they got married, and they had still remained without having sex that whole time. And that's a very big thing to have to.
Right. The purity culture.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's a lot of realizing the different things and types of controls that it had over your life, and learning to untwine those and learn to, I'm still a good moral person.
Yeah.
It's just learning to know and make decisions for yourself on, is this something that I'm okay with?
Yeah. And what I hear you saying in your story is that a big shift for you was the shunning of your brother.
Yes.
Was a huge, it was almost against your intuition, against what you knew was the right and loving thing for you to do.
Right.
I mean, you had questions about, what about college? This big mystery thing that, I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But when it came to shunning your brother, that was a whole another thing.
Right. And it really was, because, it didn't feel right. It was like I did it against my will, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's accurate to say that.
Because eventually I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I definitely tiptoed into it.
Right.
Because I was nervous, and I was more worried about getting in trouble.
Getting in trouble.
I was more worried about getting in trouble.
As an adult.
As a
How old
grown.
were you?
Oh, I was in my 30s.
Right.
As a grown adult with 2 kids myself.
Yeah.
And I was more worried about getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And at first I thought, because they tell you, well, if you have to shun them because they have to taste the sting of losing everything.
Okay.
To make them want to come back.
Right.
So I did it at first because I was like, well, I want my brother to come back. And I can't be the one that keeps him from doing that.
I see what you're saying. They presented it like, if you want him to come back,
you have to
then
shun
you
him.
have to do this. That's like the black or white thing
Right.
too. Yeah.
Which is not the case. I mean, I had a conversation with my mother, and I was like, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
Like,
so you decided to stop shunning your brother.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And like I said, I tiptoed into it because I was more nervous about getting in trouble. I was nervous about my dad giving me a hard time about it.
Yeah. The backlash from everyone else.
Yes. That's what I was really nervous about. And I didn't want to have to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, more than a nuisance, but just heavy. That's emotional control. So we can, obviously.
Right. And all, as I said, kind of it all intertwines.
Yeah.
They do blend.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my first real, going against the grain. I would say.
Yeah. Right.
For in the witness world.
Right. So yeah, it's like this. There's so much to unpack, and it's nice to distill it into a few kind of bigger examples of moments of clarity that you're having looking back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's moments of clarity. It's realizing, okay, these were things that I was taught to believe from infancy, and now I have the freedom to control my own behavior.
Yeah.
Without, and there's always consequences to whatever decisions you're making.
Right.
So it's not like just I'm unplugged and I go wild and
Right. Like you're still the thoughtful, you're a naturally thoughtful, methodical person. But now you take the time to, I think we talked about this before we got on the recording, but weighing, is this me or is this something I learned as a Jehovah's Witness?
And so those are questions I have to continually ask myself.
Yeah.
It's over certain things.
It reminds me of like a decision tree, you know? So how do you go about that process of saying, okay, I know this is me, or I know this is something that I was trained to do?
I think different times, different things happen.
Okay.
I think for me that I'm not sure. Honestly, there's sometimes I'm not sure because I have a hard time deciphering.
Okay.
Still, and so I have to think about it. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I can recognize this is from old patterns. This is an old thinking. And then sometimes like when I say I don't know, then I have to go through and think about it and either adjust it because is it really truly how I feel about it? Like, do I really care? Is this really that big of a deal?
Right. Do I have time for this right now? Probably as a mother of two.
Right.
Do I even have time to entertain this thought process right now?
Right. So I go through different things. So sometimes I immediately can recognize, ooh, that is old behavior. That's old thinking. That is completely what I was trained to think.
Okay.
When I can recognize it that quickly.
Right.
There are some things
there's something that's in your gut.
Yeah. Immediately I'm like, no, that is.
Yeah.
And then I stop and I think about, okay, how do I actually feel about this? Right. Yeah.
Which is.
Or think about it, or.
Yeah. Which is embracing your value system and who you are and your autonomy, which is it's more work to embrace this sense of self. It's like you said, those moments where you're like, okay, that's Jehovah's Witness and I can leave that at the door. But the hard part is, who am I now?
Yes. And that's ever evolving.
Yeah.
I think it's, you realize, oh, maybe I'll do this for a little bit, or this is something, or
try it out.
A hobby I'll pick up, or whatever. And you're like, okay, maybe I don't actually like it. Right. So then that's that process that I get to go through. So it's kind of fun.
Like creating your identity based on this. It's kind of like it's trial and error.
It is a lot of trial and error. A lot of trial and error. But it's good trial and error. Yeah. Because you get to like find new fun things that you're interested in, or different ways of looking at things, and taking in new perspectives.
Yeah.
And I was watching a YouTube video of someone talking about after they had left being a witness, and the way then you get to look at the world with a whole new perspective. Yeah. You get to look at worldly people with a whole new perspective, because there's a lot of wonderful people out there. Yeah. You know, it's just, it's ingrained in you to look at things a certain way, and that goes into, I'm sure, information control and, thought control and all of that. But, but it does affect your behavior towards everyone and how you treat them.
Absolutely.
Because you think, well, all these people are going to die at Armageddon.
Okay, yeah.
And so there's no need to waste my time on them anyways. Unless I am preaching to them or trying to convert them as being a witness. Yeah,
right. So what you're kind of touching at is like, you've had these, your behaviors are modified, you're remodifying your behavior, and you're finding some kind of like fun, and it's like surprising to see who you are. And like, so I guess I'm curious as to the behaviors you're doing. I feel like behavior sounds kind of clinical. Yeah. But like activities that you do, and I hear you saying that it's relational, like being able to engage with people of any walk of life.
Right. And decide for myself if I like them.
That's great.
I was like, you know, sometimes you click and you find groups of people that you click with and groups of people that you don't, and the pool's a lot bigger now.
Yeah.
That I get to choose from, and
yeah,
I think then just the thought that I had of all the different individuals and relationships I would have missed out on too.
So what I hear you saying is that it's really practicing mindfulness, that you kind of step back and you just observe, like, is this Jehovah's Witness in me? Is this me? And then you go from there.
Yes, and sometimes I have to push through the discomfort because I have the witness in me still from in certain areas.
Yeah.
And that I push through it myself.
Yeah.
I have to do it anyways.
Yeah.
Because I can recognize is old thinking.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Old thinking versus new thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I've realized. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're in this like evolution of the old versus the new. Yeah.
And some of that will stay because it's how I feel. That's
right.
That's where I'm comfortable at.
Right.
So, but it's learning to be able to then decide that for myself.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Deciding for